Hello, everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. My name is Cameron Bell. I'm taking the reins for this week's flagship as David Edgar is a little bit under the weather, so I apologise for the delay in bringing the show out to you. Hopefully you haven't missed it too much, but here to keep an eye on proceedings, and it's my pleasure because I've been able to get a hold of him and his limited availability is my very good friend, Adam Thornton. Adam, thank you very much for coming on this week's flagship. Rangers are not the only one underperforming. We're going to put Davie Edgar in that camp as well.
Yeah, another bout of COVID. Seems to get that an awful lot for someone who doesn't leave the house. But yeah, hopefully he's feeling better by the time this comes out. And yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, I joke, of course. Davie has our well wishes for a speedy recovery. But listen, Adam, we're here to talk about Rangers marching on into the League Cup final with a interesting game, I think it's fair to say, against Motherwell at Hampden on Sunday. I think we're going to talk about a lot about the negatives and positives across the course of this pod. So we'll try and provide a balanced perspective. I think that's fair to say. We always try to strike a kind of tone in the middle. We'll certainly have lots of opinions that are coming in, and we are not shy, I think, across the Rangers fan base about the current status of Rangers and our kind of thoughts towards that. How have you been feeling about it recently? I know you've done some great stuff with our friends across at the Rangers Review, where we go into some really deep analytical stuff. If you haven't seen that, folks, I really recommend you go and have a look at it. But the overall sentiment, I think, within the support, Adam, has been fairly low key, it's fair to say.
It has been. They're not feeling great about it, I think, is probably an understatement. But there's an element of inevitability about it at times, which is not a nice place to be. I think at halftime in the semi-final game, I think most people would have been thinking if Rangers don't win this game against Motherwell, no disrespect there, but Rangers should be winning pretty much every semi-final, but certainly that one, no disrespect, but if that wasn't the case, I think it was going to be very, very difficult for the manager. It's already very difficult. The vast majority have made their mind up, which is absolutely their right. We've seen 70 odd games with very little in the way of progress. Yes, there's extenuating circumstances, that's fine, but for me, the biggest number is and always will be the fact that over the last 4 windows we've spent 45 million pounds on players, and some of the stuff we're getting served up is not good enough. Talking about projects and long-term thinking is fine. It's not always realistic at Rangers, but it can be as long as you actually see progress. Some of the shows that you've mentioned there that we've done, we've spoken about the fact that there are some shoots of progress. Maybe the Barron and Raskin combination, Jeffy on the left-hand side looks a real find at times. Cass and Virgil similarly could be quite good. Cherny has started to pop up in the last month or so with some really solid contributions, but unfortunately that's about it, and it's not anywhere near enough. So yeah, I think it's all a bit of a mess at the minute. It does still feel a little bit inevitable. Getting through the semi-final, unfortunately, feels about par for most people. That's what we should be doing at the bare minimum. Some will be arguing, I myself, that you need to be playing better. You need to be performing better in these games. You need to be scoring lots more goals. It is not enough, unfortunately, anymore for this manager to just be winning games by the skin of our teeth. It needs to be seeing those signs of improvement that he keeps talking about, because we're now almost into November, but we're into that second month of when he mentioned we would see some more progress, and I'm not sure many would agree that we're seeing huge amounts of progress from even last season, never mind earlier this season.
Yeah, I spoke on last week's Extra, where I was kind of keen to point out that I suppose my attitude that I would love to see from Rangers at the moment, and holistically talking about the manager and also the players, after the disappointment up at Pittodrie, was let's just use these games as opportunities to be able to go and right some wrongs and to help steady the ship. And there was a part of me that thinks that when you see that starting lineup, that we saw in the semi-final, I don't think anyone was surprised. I think the vast majority of us could have probably put that together with, I suppose, I want to say a degree of resentment, a degree of inevitability, because the players who are not performing well at the moment, and we will come on to them shortly, I don't think that it's now down to lack of options. It was at one point. There's no getting away from that. But when you see guys who, whether they believe it or not, shouldn't be involved within that starting lineup, the manager's not doing himself any favours, let's be honest.
He's not. And he mentioned something last week, which obviously got quite a bit of, sparked quite a bit of debate about risky to change formation when the players haven't trained it. Now, obviously, the tactical side is what I'm most interested in. My first question would be, I find it a little bit baffling that you haven't thought about over the year or so that you've been here, a winter break and a pre-season. It hasn't even considered that we might train a different formation or drill with a back three. So that if we have to go to it in a pinch, it's something that we can do. So that's a little bit concerning at that side, that we're so inflexible that it can only be the setup that we're talking about here.
And he said, I mean, I know we're gonna talk about quotes that come back and bite him in the arse, but he said after Leon, there are other systems that we can play, or words to that effect, was that he was considering, that there could be changes, and then comes out afterwards against Aberdeen saying, like, I say post Aberdeen, but in the run up to this game, that it would implement seeds of doubt into the players, and so you can't really have it both ways. It just feels like a bit like any answer will do.
That's exactly it. I think there's been a few times where he's sort of said the opposite, or said he didn't say something that is recorded that he did, and I think we are guilty overall of taking too much stock in what managers say and taking every single word literally. But that's the game. That's how it works. Everybody knows that. Either don't say anything, or what you say needs to be consistent, and you see the evidence of that on the pitch. When you try and say that something isn't what it was, or say something completely opposite, you do lose a little bit of credibility with the fans. We've seen that with the last manager. You talk yourself into corners and things just make you, it just doesn't help. It just adds it on. So yeah, I think that part of it's a little bit worrying for me. Is he's quite, I guess, cautious in that sense, and not looking to take risks. But then the other side of that is looking at some of the players that you've mentioned, such as Tavernier, Dessers, even Lawrence to an extent, but Lawrence has chipped in with a good few goals recently, but overall isn't the answer for Rangers starting as a number 10, and particularly isn't the answer with Dessers as a partnership, and we can come on to that later on. But the idea that it's too risky to take out those players that either aren't robust enough, good enough, injury free, all that sort of stuff. The idea that is less of a risk than keeping them in the team underperforming massively with all the fan is less of a risk than anything else. Again, just seems a little bit strange to me. Football should always be risk or reward. I've argued for years that James Tavernier, risk versus reward, he's always been performing at a level that mitigates some of the risks in terms of defensive ability, all that sort of stuff, because he was contributing so much to the attack, because he's been scoring goals and assists. That's gone now, and I think you see that risk and reward has now flipped the other way. So for me, it's as simple as that. If the player isn't giving you a net overall contribution that is good enough, and there are people in the wings that could potentially help with that, then I don't see how it's less risky to keep going with an option that doesn't look like it's getting any better. And I do count probably the three of them in that. Lawrence, like I said, a little bit harsh in there, but I think that's more of a how we want to play and being suited to the roles type of thing. He has chipped in with a few goals recently.
Yeah, Lawrence is an interesting one because it's felt so stop-start with Tom Lawrence. You're absolutely right. Listen, we have points on the board. Thanks to Tom Lawrence winning goals. And I'd said before, when he got his second to last injury, I think it was, that my hope was that when he came back, he would recover some of that form. And that's again, incredibly optimistic because, when players do get injured, it's a tough ask for them to be able to try and recover that. And we have to take into account the human element of that, where when you're in form, you're scoring goals, you're scoring winners. The last thing you want is to stop playing football for any reason. Manager's not going to drop you, obviously, but the thing is, you just want to ensure that you keep that run of form going. And you're not going to hit it all the time. That's totally understandable. But one thing we've been incredibly shy on throughout this Rangers team is confidence and belief. So when a player has that, you obviously want to make sure that you utilise him. But that being said, he's too, to use your own terminology there, the risk versus the reward for Tom Lawrence is, I think that we overutilise him at times, and it probably would have been easier for us to be able to kind of game manage him slightly better. But, that's with the benefit of hindsight. The difference, I think, for me with James Tavernier, and this isn't a new thing, by the way, because I've said for a number of years now that we've overplayed James Tavernier at times. We've included him in games that we didn't need to include him within, early rounds of the domestic cups, for example, against lower league opposition. There was elements of that where we could just have said, look, we'll just give someone else a turn in there. The likelihood being that the manager at that time would have said to him, look, we're going to give you the rest. Take a breather. Don't worry about it. You're going to get back in the next league game, or the next European game, whatever it happened to be. So don't stress. But it's just to give you a rest and be able to get into it. And he made mention of that when he did his interview prior to Motherwell, where he'd mentioned that, he's used to playing 60 games a season. There's a lot that you can take out of that interview where he's mentioned he's getting stronger every game. I don't think anyone I've spoken to agrees with that. But this is just a bad run of form. But because he's been undroppable in the past, this is where it almost feels like as if we're trying to give him the cover by continuing to utilise him. And yet you see the difference it made on Sunday when we took him off, and the team just looked far more confident. It just looked with more belief. I'm not purely assigning that to James Tavernier's involvement with it. I think that's a big load for him to carry. But there has to be something now. There has to be a stronger conversation with him to say, look, you are not playing well. That's, not a fault. I don't imagine for a single minute that you're looking to play as badly as you are, but the evidence is there.
It is, and like I said, you won't find a bigger fan of Tavernier than me over the last 8-9 years in terms of what he's given, contribution, goals and assists and all that. But that's dried up now, and you're left with a player who's just turned 33 and has put in an incredible number of miles, incredible amount of games on the clock. You mentioned there all those games under the last 4 managers, and he's missed, if not single figures, then it can't be much more than 2025 over that 6 or 7 years. It's just simply not sustainable for any player. And someone who, I guess, when we have had for 5 or 6 years such a lack of attacking talent to take up the slack, it's only natural that I guess he's had to play every minute because he's been at times the only player who might be able to score a goal. You've seen that on Wednesday night. He's in the centre circle as a right back trying to head the ball into the net to try and salvage a draw. It's just as much, for me, other attackers' fault that we're over reliant on James Tavernier as an attacking threat as it is coaching and all that sort of stuff. So that's something that hopefully the balance can shift there. But yeah, I totally agree overall. I think for a while I've advocated that we need to become less reliant on flinging balls into the box, which we've still been doing this season, whether it was Tavernier and Barisic, whether it was Tavernier and Jeffrey or Bassey. We need to be moving away from that. We need more onus on the midfielders and the wide players to be creating, to take the ball and impact the final thirds. If we can do that, then a more naturally defensive fullback certainly makes sense because it allows you to free up the midfield. It means you don't have to play with a traditional defensive midfielder. You're going to have a right back who's going to sit there, a la Sergio Perini, if you want a sort of throwback example. And Jeffrey on the other side can be the attacking fullback who has the physicality, has the pace to be able to do that, given he's almost 15 years younger. So that to me feels like a nice balance. Cammy. If not an actual full back three, then certainly a more defensive right back that frees up the middle of the pitch. How many times have we seen John Lundstrom, Ryan Jack, Connor Barron dropping deep to take the ball off the toes of centre backs? If we can sort of free that up and have a more defensive minded right back there, that'll allow those midfielders, you would hope, in theory, to go higher, and allow us to attack better through central areas, kind of similar to, I guess, what we did on Sunday's game when Tavernier went off, and we've seen a bit more structure, I guess, defensively. It sort of freed up a few players to go and create, if we're being honest, some pretty decent goals. Those last two, given everything that's been happening, the two goals in the semi-final were pretty well worked moves.
If we were to go down that road, because we'll stick with the defence at the moment, because obviously we have to talk about up top. We will do that in just a moment. But if we were to stick with that at the moment, is the answer in your mind Dijon Sterling at right back? Given Casemiro has now played for me a couple of times at centre half, and it just looks calmer. Now, I don't want to go down the road of the argument that, you know, he looks better because he's not robbing Proper, because that, I think, is a real concern about Proper's form has absolutely fallen off of a cliff. Rightly not involved against Motherwell. But when Casemiro came on, he went into centre half against St Mirren. I just felt a tangible difference in terms of the calmness. It did breed a little bit of belief in terms of we weren't chasing ourselves whenever we got a high ball over from St Mirren. And I think I've argued against the idea of putting Dijon Sterling in at right back, because I think that athletically he might be able to offer us a little bit more in the midfield, which is maybe been needed at times. Maybe it's not needed now. So maybe that's a little bit of a kind of change in shape. But would you prefer to see Sterling in there at the moment? Or are we sticking with Casemiro, assuming that we continue to have John Suter at centre half? And I don't know how much is left in Leon Balogun's tank, and Proper just seems out of the picture at the moment.
Yeah, so I think it's all, I think you alluded to it there, it's all a bit of a juggling act, isn't it? Because if you take someone out of somewhere else, what is their replacement going to be? And vice versa. I think we've happened upon something half decent, or it looks half decent with Barron and Raskin. I think that's how a double pivot, two-man midfield, two-man defensive midfield should look. There shouldn't really be an expectation that they get forward and score lots of goals. They should be there as a partnership to protect the defence, do the dirty work, if you like, and try and get the ball forwards. And I think over the last couple of weeks, Raskin has been really good at that. I don't think Barron has quite reached some of the good points he did earlier in the season. There's been a few sloppy points for me. But that's what you. So if you've happened upon that, then I probably agree with you. There's no space for Dijon Sterling in there. So then it's about, okay, where else needs a bit of attention? So it would either be Sterling or Casemiro at right back. I agree with you then that Casemiro has looked more composed at centre half in that very limited showing, arguably. But they have, and I include Sterling in this as well, they have this thing that we've lacked for too long in defence, which is 1v1 ability. Like, just to be able to dominate your man physically, got the pace there as well. They can play out Casemiro better than Sterling on the ball. Certainly, I would say from what I've seen so far. But they've just got that ability that if there is a counter-attack and someone's 1v1 with them, you'd fancy your chances, because they're young, they're physical, they're quick to a point, and they're both comfortable with that sort of 1v1 defending. So I would be comfortable with that. And I think, like you said, issues around Proper, issues around availability with Balogun, also issues around John Suter for me. But again, probably least out of those three, I would say, in terms of issues. So if you're then starting to deal with your options and jiggle things about, then yeah, I think overall, if we're looking at maybe something like Barron and Raskin, Sterling right back, Casemiro and Suter, and then Jeff Day at left back. I think that looks okay just now, but knowing Rangers, something will happen next week and one of them will make a huge mistake or get injured, and we'll be back to square one. But yeah, I'd like to see that settle down into something like that. That seems reasonable. I'm less sure with the front four that we can cobble together a front four that looks quite well balanced and is fit and will be clinical and all that sort of stuff. But definitely for that back six, if you like. I don't think we're missing a proper centre half for me. I've said this in the summer. We're absolutely missing a proper centre half, and if we're being honest, we're missing a number six sort of playmaker style. If we can work around that and have Barron and Raskin as that pivot and ask for more from our attackers in terms of picking up the slack there, then great. But I think where we are just now, without those two big signings, I think that seems just about okay for now.
It's interesting because, you say, moving forward through the team, there's definitely some signs in there. Vladimir Černý, for me, was a huge miss against Aberdeen at Pittodrie. And I think you saw the difference that he made against Motherwell. He's come on to a game, right? I think it's fair to say. Černý, I think he was, certainly his performance was nowhere near these kind of levels up until the last few games. And just almost as you predicted there, he goes into the Aberdeen game with a knock, doesn't feature, and I think he was a big miss. On Sunday, however, he just looked positive. He just wanted to be able to get the ball and be able to drive forward with it. Played in a couple of nice passes for Cyriel Dessers as well. Again, we're not going to admit him, but it feels like as if there is some semblance there of us almost being able to try and get it right. And it's maybe what you said at the start, that there are absolute shoots there that are coming up that you think, that's interesting to see as to how that could develop. What I'm really curious to kind of get your thoughts on, because I think we've all kind of been talking at the moment, is would you see a discernible difference if we were to move Nadim Bijrani into the number 10, being able to bring him kind of further inside? Because Černý, at times I feel where he's at he's most positive, and probably how he likes to penetrate is when he's obviously coming in on side. He loves that, cutting in, being able to try and get a shot away with his left. Bijrani, I think, for me, feels like as if he's kind of drifting into that position at times, and it can cause questions for his marker, because he's not as traditional a winger in terms of being able to get to the byline and putting a cross in. Would you like to see us giving him that opportunity in terms of sitting in at that number 10, assuming Lawrence may not make it against either, Olympiakos or Hearts, but just thinking about the next few games coming up, is this an opportunity for us to be able to experiment with that?
Yeah, so on Černý first, I've been desperate for years to have a left-footed right winger who can cut inside and score goals and create from that way. I think it just adds a really nice dimension to our play. It's something that when Joe Aribo was here, I was hoping he would sort of end up potentially being that guy on that right hand side when he played there and sort of cut inside. I think it's clear now that he's better suited being a bit deeper, just for the type of player he is. But Černý, that's his position. That's how he plays. My issue was in the early weeks, maybe just becoming a little bit one-dimensional with that, a la Matondo on the other side, where that's all you're going to do. You're just going to cut inside and smash one. I think a big part of how well Černý has done recently is how varied his contribution has been. I mean, you look at the game on Sunday, the pass for Barron to set up Dessers' goal was a lovely little disguised left-footed pass, but it's between the lines, lovely little disguised pass. His opportunities, when he hit the goalkeeper saved it, is one of those chances you would expect him to be taken. He had another one of those that was blocked, but then his set up for the goal for Bajrami, again a little disguised pass. The keeper probably thinks he's going to take that chance, that shot again from there, but he rolls it across. I like to see that little bit of difference, because you don't want to be one-dimensional. It might just be him settling in, getting used to everything, getting used to his teammates now, so he trusts that a little bit more and doesn't just want to take it on himself. But we'll see how that lasts. Wingers are always streaky players. It may just be a little bit of a hot streak, but he's definitely contributing well in there, and I think it's clear that he won't move from that position. On Bajrami, again, it's that whole jigsaw puzzle piece, because if you move, we've got an abundance of number 10s now. I've always seen Diomande as being certainly not a deeper midfielder, probably more like a 10 than than a defensive midfielder. We've got Tom Lawrence, who the manager loves. You've got Yanis Hadji, and then you've got Bayrami. So the squad building, for some reason, we've ended up with one fit winger and 4 number 10s in a system that we play 2 wingers and 1 number 10. So that balance is off a little bit there. So I can understand why Bayrami is playing out wide, because we have no one else available there. So yeah, I think for just now, that seems okay. With Bayrami out there, what I would like, I think it's very unlikely, but if you think about that combination between the right attacker and the left attacker, when he was at Monaco, he had Golovin on the right hand side who would cut inside and score, and then his name escapes me on the left hand side, but more often than not, it would be kind of pacey guy who would hit the byline, was a sort of more traditional winger, if you want to call it that, would go outside his man and try and get balls into the box. Maybe similar to a Cortez or what Matondo could maybe have been 5 or 6 years ago, but that type of style. So the fact that Bayrami's playing on that side and cutting in, and Czerny's playing on the other side and cutting in, seems like the same thing on each flank, which isn't quite what he's done before. So I get there's not a player there that can play left wing, but for me, someone like Egeman or even Jeffy, I don't agree with pushing Jeffy forward. I think he's much better further back. But if Ridvan had been fit, then again, that jigsaw puzzle, it might have been a better overall net positive to have Jeffy a little bit further up for a bit. But even Egeman, when he was at his previous club, has played off the left-hand side a little bit. Didn't start too many games, but would drift out and play there, pick up the ball, look to take men on, hit the byline, commit men. That type of balance, I think, on either side would be good. If Cortez ends up being that guy, great. I think that would then, for me, necessitate a shift to move Bayrami into the middle, which I think is his natural position. So yeah, long-winded way of saying right now I can understand why he's playing out there. He's definitely contributing, 100%. He's popping up with some important goals, and he would have a hell of a lot more assists if the person he was passing to scored more than 1 in 15 shots. But I'm sure we're going to come on to that. So yeah, overall I think it's okay with Bayrami out there, but I would like to see him move in centrally. Again, that then leaves you another problem, that you've got another midfielder that cost 4.5 million. 2 of them technically, Hadji and Diomande, vying for a position and can't get in the team. That's healthy competition, I guess, at times, but given how scarce our options are in other areas of the pitch, the fact that you're going to have maybe 4 million pound players sitting on the bench and not being able to get a game isn't ideal at all. So yeah, long-winded. I can understand it, but I would hope moving forwards we can try and get Bayrami into the middle.
I mean, the point about Hadji is absolutely bang on. I have always treated it with a little bit of a pinch of salt in terms of Yanis Hadji being able to come back into the team and what he can contribute. I think at the moment, just now, you mentioned competition for places. I think that's absolutely valid, but it feels a little bit to me like we're in that space because you're almost playing in there as a default because of lack of other options within certain positions within a team, even if it's not your natural one. And I think to be honest with you, that's rife throughout the side for all of the outfield playing positions at times. Let's rip the plaster off and let's talk about Cyriel Dessers. I'm going to get sick of saying this in terms of the cliche, but the much maligned Cyriel Dessers, he is just, I think for me, Sunday just showed peak Cyriel Dessers. Should have had a chance in the first half. Great shot by Diomande, which is well saved. Comes out to Dessers, harder not to score. Again, another cliche when saying his name. Misses that opportunity and then gets us back into the game with the equaliser. With what on second viewing, I probably didn't appreciate this at the game at the time, but it's actually a really nice finish because when Czerny plays ball to him, he realises where he's at. Now, no one, I think, expected him to be able to finish first time because we're used to seeing him taking far too many touches in the box, something I know that you've spoken about before. But he does a lovely kind of dink over the keeper without even really thinking. It almost looks like a natural striker's finish. And somewhat bizarrely, the one that he missed was actually a lot harder. But this is Cyriel Dessers in an absolute nutshell. It feels like he just cannot compose himself well enough to be as lethal as we need him to be. Again, going back to last week, he comes on, sets up the winner. Against St Mirren, I beg your pardon. Sets up the winner for Czerny. Absolutely brimming with confidence, runs off celebrating as if he scored the goal. Absolutely non-existent against Aberdeen. I know he scored the goal that kind of led us to being offside, but I'm not really going to give him too much of a respite in that one. And then we talk about the goal that we mentioned, which obviously turned out to be the winner. Danilo makes a diagonal run, which, if I'm being honest with you, didn't look like much was going to come of it. But then, again, looking back at it, you see that he drags 3 Motherwell players with him during that run, which creates that space Barani can then use. It's just infuriating at times to be able to see where he should have been able to understand where this part of his game needs to be developed and where he certainly needs to be more predatory within the box. He goes off, and by the way, I'm not convinced at the moment just now Danilo is an immediate answer, but you just saw a change in terms of the forward play and what the attack was. And we've mentioned, by the way, some of the players, if you talk about it within that kind of front four, front five, however you want to try and rotate it. I also, even from when I'd played football, if you know that there's a guy who you're not going to get anything from and that you're kind of sick of seeing him passing up gilt-edged chances, it's demotivating. You might not necessarily stop it because you don't want to interrupt the flow of the game or you don't want to interrupt the system that the manager has told you to execute, but it's disheartening at the very least. And I think that I think you'll see a sea change, if I'm being honest, if you were able to play a striker in there that can not only finish chances more regularly, but also will make movement that allows you space and time to be able to operate and do something with a little bit more variety. For me at the moment, he needs to come out of that squad. I cannot tell you. I'm keen to get your thoughts. If that's Danilo, if that's Egerman, if that's Lovelace, that has to be able to come in and place him. But right now, his value in terms of what he's bringing within the team is as low as I can ever remember.
So I think where I stand on that is a great striker can make a bad team look good, and I think the opposite is true for bad strikers. They can exacerbate a problem within teams that maybe aren't set up. But again, I think this is a limited player for me, and to be honest, it was always going to be this way. I remember doing shows last summer with Dessers and saying like he looks like he's never seen a football before, but he'll score goals. Because that's what I watched a couple of games, clips, etc. And sometimes falls over the ball, but other times will pull something out of nowhere. Most people listening probably think the XG is useless. It's useless for Dessers because you can't get an average at all. It's impossible. There's like you said there, he'll pull a worldie out the net, out the hat. Sorry, that should really be a really difficult chance, and then the next time he'll miss an open goal as he did at the weekend. It's impossible to get an average measure. You can't tell whether he's going to keep going through dry patches or come back to the purple patch he had at the start of the season. And I think that is an issue. But I think there's a coaching aspect of that or a tactical aspect of it as well, because we ask him to do things that he's not capable of. We punt balls up to him and ask him to hold up. Yes, of course, he should be able to do these things, but he can't consistently. I think that's been proven. He can't bully 2 defenders. He can't hold the ball up. He can't necessarily bring players into play often enough. He can't run in behind. He doesn't really have a great sense for that. What he does have is just this innate ability to just appear in the box and have a bit of space. Unfortunately, execution lets him down more often than not, but he has that ability. That's a positive thing that you could say. He gets a lot of chances, and it's because he has that thing where he just gravitates to the space. He has that centre forward instinct. At that point, there's no other centre forward instinct really that I can see. So I think the great example is the first goal. that is how we should play football. I've said that for years. You should have players moving about on the right hand side, a give and go, Baron running, a central midfielder running in behind, hitting the byline, kind of, and then cutting the ball back to someone to score. That is a cast iron way to score goals against teams that sit in deep when you've got better players, when you've got more physical players. The fact that we don't do that and it looks like we don't train things like that has been a massive issue for me for 4 or 5 years, probably longer. So I was delighted to see that goal yesterday. But more importantly, Cammy, it puts Dessers in a position where he just has to stick his foot out and score, because or stick his foot out and have the shot. There's no opportunity. The ball's slightly behind him. He can't really take a touch and chop onto his left foot because there's just not. He's run out of space. So as stupid as it sounds, if he's going to be the guy, and he has been the only guy for most of this year, then force him into those situations. Don't have him playing back to goal, trying to be an attacking midfielder who's threading balls into other people. We've seen in this game that the passer by Rami Elidors, he can't even execute those. He does it sometimes. It was a great pass last year for Matondo, wasn't it, against PSV? But it's very much inconsistent. So put him in the area where he can do damage, and then give him the ball in a way that means he doesn't have any time to think, and he can only just do that. And he'll score goals. I've not got any doubt of that. Yes, there'll still be some huge misses, and we'll get frustrated with him, but he can score goals there. Danilo, again, been a big fan of what Danilo could be, I think, since he joined. I did think he would be a great option for us. He scored a good amount of goals for us when you consider the minutes on the pitch. Unfortunately, the minutes on the pitch have been the big issue. He's pretty much now a year, isn't it, that he has been out, give or take. But again, yeah, like you mentioned, that off the ball run, that's a very basic centre forward move. It's not even, shouldn't even really be that noteworthy, but because we haven't really seen it, because we're not seeing something fresh up there, we're all treating it like it's a master stroke. But he does well, creates that space, and then Tierney can roll the ball in. Whether Danilo's the guy up there, I'm not sure. We'll have to wait and see. Egerman for me still feels a little bit too raw to lead the line. That's why I was thinking maybe get minutes off the flank, off that left hand side would be quite good to get him used to the culture, the team, the training, the environment, all that sort of stuff, the physicality. I think it might be better for there, because the 2 times he started up top, he has looked a little bit lost. He's certainly taken off at halftime in one game. I'm not sure about the first game. I can't quite remember. So yeah, I think for me, I'd like to see Danilo, but he needs to prove that he's fit. He needs to prove that he's capable. I actually think Danilo, again, might be someone that's decent in the number 10 position in this team. Someone who has a great eye for goal, can hold the ball up, can bring others into play, has good movement, and has that goal threat. Like I said, I think that could be an option, but we're severely collecting number 10s if we do that. And again, it leaves you with that issue up top that if I want to move Egerman wide left, then I think Danilo's better at number 10. Then all you're left with is Dessers. So I think Danilo needs to be getting proper minutes in that striker slot for me. And if we can rotate him, then fine. Dessers will be useful. And again, I mentioned Lawrence there. Dessers and Lawrence can't play together for me. They're too similar. They can't do the same things, and they can do the same things, if that makes sense. That both of their ability is to find space, have a shot, score goals. They can't really run in behind. They can't hold up. They don't have really a physical threat or an aerial threat. Playing them both together, certainly in games away to Parkhead or away to Pittodrie or away in Europe, doesn't really, you're not going to get much from them in terms of that off-ball stuff. So looking to get players in there with a little bit more legs would be key, or at the very least one player in there to give them a bit of a balance. Both, I think, would be decent options this season to come off the bench and try and pop up and get a goal in games. But starting every single game and both of them, I don't think that's something that we can really continue with. And like you said at the start there, it's not like we don't have some options now coming back. Let's hope Cortez is back relatively soon as well. Ridvan should hopefully be back also at some point, and we can then start to get some more physicality into the team, whether it's, like I said, Cortez in that left hand side, or maybe Jeffy moving up a little bit just to help us out in a pinch, and then shuffle the rest of it around. But yeah, I think that's my that's my tuppence worth on the attackers.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main problem I've got now with Cyriel Dessers is that if we were to talk about how and where to utilise him, which would involve some degree of rotation, because again, I come back to that word of, he was a default striker towards the tail end of last season. And listen, let's not rewrite history. He did start this season well. But I think, Sunday was his first goal, I think, in 8 games, and he's had plenty of minutes to be able to try and back that up. But my issue with the rotation, I think, is I'm so concerned about his confidence. I think at times he looks both mentally strong and weak. He get taken off on Sunday, and I think there was a little bit of dialogue that was happening between him, the manager, and some of the other subs once he came off, that he almost looked a bit downtrodden that he had been taken out of the picture. And that's not the first time, by the way, we've seen that happen elsewhere. And that's what concerns me, that if you're to use him probably infrequently, that you need to make sure that he's well supported within that space. That doesn't mean, by the way, that, if we weren't to get a suitor for him in January, then, I wouldn't bite your hand off for it. But right now, based on the fragility of the other players within that position, because I agree with you, Igman is raw. I can see what he's trying to do when he has played, but he's also meandered slightly through good intent, I may say, right? Not deliberately, but he's done it because I think he does want to be able to get involved in it. And we have to take into account, he's not been lucky with his start to the season due to one reason or another. And Danilo, I agree with you. I'm willing to give Danilo a little bit of time, but the challenge around that obviously is, he hasn't had the best of luck with injuries. So how much can you rely on him is probably the question. Let's look forward then, Adam.
Just that Dessers thing, sorry, just the final point there, I guess, is something you kind of alluded to. It's not sustainable for a club like Rangers to have someone who's costing £4 or £5 million and being, I don't know how much he's getting a month, but it's probably not sustainable to have that amount of money sitting on the bench. So maybe that's a situation that's happened at his previous clubs. He has only stayed at clubs for a year usually. Maybe they get 1 year and think you're not the guy for me. I'm going to bring someone else in, and he moves on. I think that's not sustainable for Rangers. But like you said, it has to involve someone coming in with a bid, the player wanting to go, and us looking to sell, and some of the other options haven't exactly proved themselves at the minute. So yeah, on that basis, on a sort of purely playing side basis, I think having Dessers as a sub and coming off the bench invariably to probably nip in with the odd goal would be good. But financially, it's a bit doesn't make a huge amount of sense.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he's approach to it changes now that he's got some degree of competition for his spot. So I don't know. We'll have to see, obviously, what happens with that with the next couple of months. And then, obviously, when the mid-season window opens. Let's finish up then, Adam. Just looking forward to heading across to Greece on Thursday night as Europa League action returns. Rangers, 6:15 kickoff against Olympiakos. An interesting one for me. Olympiakos, they're 10 games into their season. They're currently sitting 4th. But from a Europa League perspective, they've already taken a scalp off of Braga at home, beat them pretty convincingly, I think it's fair to say. Got a 1-0 win against Malmo. 2-0 loss against Lyon, which I think is fair. It's been interesting. I've talked to a few fans about this, about Thursday night, and opinions have kind of varied because, we are shit out of confidence and belief at the moment as a fan base. Being able to get a decent result against Motherwell isn't going to change that. I don't think unless, it was a complete rout that anyone would really have then started to kind of have an uplift in their overall mood. But that being said, I think this team performs differently within the Europa League. I think it feels a little bit like the pressure's off. There's financial incentive. Obviously, we can't be glib when it comes to European games because we know what we can get as a result of being able to get good results in games such as this. But I also mentioned what I said earlier on. Maybe there's a chance here where we can start to do some degree of rotation or tinkering, or being able to look at it as, we need to consider being able to move things up a little bit. I'll be interested to see what that starting lineup looks like when we get to Thursday afternoon.
Yeah, me too. And again, it's this weird contrast for Rangers that has been there for 6-7 years, that we do well in these games and struggle in other games. And I think the answers to that we are well documented. We've spoken about it before. Maybe your point there as well about maybe getting up for the big occasion or pressure being off, but just simply the fact there's more space. You're playing against teams who are good to very good in their leagues, therefore don't do a lot of defending. And they're coming up against teams, in our case, that they probably think they can beat. Therefore, they're going to come out and try and attack. That suits us. It's always suited us. It's a little bit of a bugbear of mine just now that the manager keeps referencing that Malmo game in terms of we played well there, almost as an excuse for not playing well against Kilmarnock, when it's just a completely different challenge and almost a completely different sport. The Rangers manager who comes in and makes us difficult to beat in Europe, but can blow away the opposition and can break down 10-man defences will go very, very far. We're yet to find that man in probably 40 years of me being a Rangers fan. But anyone that can do that can flip that switch and give us the 10 or 15 extra points in the league without impacting the European performance too much will go very far. So yeah, it's a bit of a bugbear that the manager keeps referencing those. Malmo came out, they weren't really very good in terms of their shape. They made it quite easy for us to attack. So not to take anything away from a great victory, but we don't get that type of space domestically. And that's where we struggle. But Thursday's game could be the same. It's more likely to be a challenge like a Malmo or a Steaua Bucharest. Maybe not in terms of quality. I think Olympiakos are probably a level up, but in terms of that setup and that style, I'd be very, very surprised if they sit in and ask Rangers to break them down. So it's conceivable that there could be those opportunities for us. In terms of who plays, just kind of goes back to my point there. I'd like to start seeing a settled lineup. I'd like to see pace, physicality, work rate, creativity, all that sort of stuff. So it would be quite good. Like I said, there's probably going to be a bit of counter-attacking, therefore it'd be good to find a bit of pace somewhere up front. I think it probably is only really a man who is close to quick that's fit. So if there's a space for him on the wing and bring Bayrami into the middle with Lawrence's assumed injury, that might be quite interesting and might give them something to think about. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this one because Rangers in Europe, you just don't know what's going to happen.
Yep, very fair. And I think I come back to that phrase that I used earlier on, see it as an opportunity. Don't go across there with any fear or anything like that. We just need to start building and hopefully being able to progress into the League Cup final is another step into that building process. And then we've got Olympiakos and then Hearts on Sunday. And I will be back with Heart and Hand Extra on Friday to discuss that Olympiakos game and to look forward to returning back to Ibrox on Sunday. A weird kickoff, Adam, on Sunday, a 5 o'clock kickoff. I really hate that on a Sunday, but yeah, it's an odd one. Odd one. But sorry, on you go.
I was going to say not as bad as that 8 o'clock Sunday night one. I think it was.
Yeah, that was awful.
I only live like 10 miles away, and it was like midnight before I got home. So it's a shame for everyone that has to travel a lot further than me.
Yeah, absolutely. But listen, we'll worry about that when we get to it. Thank you to our producers in London, Mick Lee, Paul Myers. Thank you all for listening. If you'd like to hear more, all content Rangers related, plus some great stuff, including Mr. Thornton's superb show that he does, the main event, all about the Champions League, then head on over to patreon.com/Heart and Hand, and you will get all of the Rangers news that you need. And like I say, much more on a variety of topics. Most importantly, for me to do today as I step in for Mr. Edgar, is to thank the ever excellent Adam Thornton. Adam, thank you for coming on. Some great chat there. Really enjoyed it. And really appreciate you giving up your time.
Thanks, Cammy.
Thanks for listening, folks. As I say, we'll be back with you on Friday, but you know where to get all the rest of your Heart and Hand content. Speak soon. Bye-bye.